This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Good news, team. We have an exciting new sponsor here at the Crypto Conversation, and well, they are perfectly positioned for today's changing investment environment. Because with market volatility so high and the expected returns for stocks and bonds so low, I tend to agree with the analysts at JP Morgan who have declared that alternative assets are no longer optional. And that is good news for those platforms who can provide access to the top alternative asset classes like Masterworks. Yes, Masterworks.io has solidified itself as the platform for investing in contemporary art. And Masterworks is on a mission to democratize art investing, which is a 1.7 trillion asset class. How do they do this? Well, Masterworks is the first platform to make it possible to purchase shares that represent an investment in multi-million-dollar artworks from iconic artists such as Banksy, Kaws, and Basquiat, all at a price point tailored to you. And since 2017, Masterworks has sold a number of iconic artworks, with each returning over 30% net IRR to investors. Legally, I have to follow that with past performance is no guarantee of future results. Now, if you want to get in early, just go to masterworks.art/cryptoconversations to skip their waitlist. That's masterworks.art/cryptoconversations. And you can see important Regulation A disclosures at masterworks.io/CD. And now it's on with the show. My guest today is Zaki Manian. Zaki is the co-founder of the Sommelier Finance DeFi platform, which is a coprocessor for the Ethereum virtual machine. Welcome to the show, Zaki.
Great to be here.
Great to have you here. So, yeah, I think let's begin with Sommelier Finance. Love to just understand a bit about that. But in fact, before we do that even, Zaki, let's begin with your good self. So I'd love it if you could please introduce yourself. Just love to understand what interesting things you've been doing with your life and what has brought you down the dark path of DeFi.
Absolutely. I've been involved in the blockchain space for almost 8 years now. I sort of got into the space in the late 2013, early 2014. Many people know me from my involvement in the Cosmos ecosystem. I was very involved. I was, essentially, was very one of the key people in sort of launching the Cosmos ecosystem, deploying IBC, and been very active in the crypto space since then. I tend to have a lot of different projects. Sommelier is definitely one of the projects that I spend the largest chunk of my time on. But I'm very involved in Cosmos still. I'm very involved in the Agoric ecosystem. I am very excited about bridging protocols and sort of multi-chain systems. That continues, and Sommelier is just another piece of that puzzle of I like to build protocols, I like to run organizations, I like to hire people, I like to manage teams. These are typically what I do day in and day out.
Fantastic. Well, let's learn a bit more about Sommelier Finance in that case then, Zaki.
Yeah,
please go.
Break down.
Yeah.
What is Sommelier? What is Sommelier? What are we doing? How does that fit into the picture? So, Sommelier is so the way you can think about what Sommelier is so there's two angles you come at it. One is we have this sort of very sophisticated, complex protocol that we built that there's nothing like it in the blockchain space today. And then there's the question of what problem does it solve? So I'm going to start with the problem that it solves, which is The problem it solves is DeFi is really about this vision of, taking the constrained world of finance where, only an elite group of people are able to participate in these different parts of the financial workflows, market making, lending, etc. And the dream of DeFi is to really open these democratized access to finance, democratized access, not just to, being the consumer of finance, but also being on the producer side, on the producer side, on the intermediary side, really open finance up to, and I think that is, to me, like the purest vision of what DeFi is. But as DeFi protocols have evolved post sort of, DeFi summer of 2020, we're seeing this arms race of sophistication and complexity in the protocols. You sort of see it in the progression from sort of Uniswap V2 to Uniswap V3, where Uniswap V2 felt like very much an even playing field between sort of professional market makers and ordinary retail liquidity providers. Uniswap V3 has become like this, playground for very sophisticated entities like Wintermute and Jump that have become, where like traditional finance expertise has now been brought to bear and is like largely, in many ways, outcompeting sort of retail participants. So Sommelier exists as a platform, as a system, to sort of try to even that playing field, to build an open platform that can allow retail DeFi users to still sort of stay in the game by collaborating with what we call strategists to have this sort of medium frequency rebalancing portfolio management strategy that allows you to sort of allows sort of like end users to get more of the experience of using these DeFi platforms that is available to a Wintermute or a Jump. So I can start with like sort of a first example. So we have the blockchain has been live. There is a token trading on IBC enabled DEXs, a little bit right now. The platform has been live for many months, but we've been really refining the protocol that enables what we call sellers, which are these managed DeFi platforms. And our first seller is built on top of Aave, and it is basically a strategy that looks at. So you think, you can lend a variety of different assets on Aave, and you can lend a variety of different stablecoins. You can lend Tether, you can lend USDC, you can lend DAI. But it turns out that the yield on these different assets that are all pegged to the dollar, for instance, or on like other baskets of similar assets, can actually vary widely. And so if you're like a sort of very passive sort of retail user, and you're just like, okay, I would just like to take my USDC, stick it in Aave, earn 2%, great. You are actually missing out on what could be far higher yields. And so what Sommelier is doing is we are using this protocol that we have built out of multiple components, including a Cosmos chain and the Gravity bridge, and which is a bridge to EVM blockchains that is natively running on top of the Sommelier chain, and these off-chain sort of strategy oracles that we've and this protocol for doing that we've constructed. It allows the strategy oracle to be constantly rebalancing what asset you're lending on Aave for the optimal yield. And we've shown in our back testing that what we anticipate is you could get 3 to 4x the yield in this sort of actively managed strategy than you would just sort of passively participating in these protocols, and in Aave in particular.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And what kind of What kind of, I suppose, user participation are you seeing at the moment, Zaki? There's a lot of
So
different.
sellers aren't live yet.
Right.
So we have gone through a number of different iterations of sellers, and experimented, and have had, a couple of thousand people participate in our experiments. But we have this imminent seller launch. We are sort of waiting for all of the pieces to come through. We have we have sort of announced the Aave seller, and what it is that what the first target application is. We have the contracts are in audit right now, and we're waiting for that. And then there's also going to be an upgrade of the Sommelier chain to enable sellers to go live, this Aave seller to go live. And all the pieces are sort of landing right now, and I'm anticipating and we're going to provide some substantial incentives through liquidity mining from the Sommelier community treasury, to encourage people to try out this new mechanism of lending stablecoins.
Very nice. And you said at the beginning, Zaki, that you were very involved with Tendermint and Cosmos.
Yep.
How do you think? I guess if we zoom out a bit, how do you think about the more broader potential of DeFi as we kind of move to this multi-chain, cross-chain future? How do you see the sort of early building blocks of this being laid, and what do you think a more mature DeFi ecosystem will look like?
So I think what we've seen is, first, DeFi was okay. DeFi is a thing that exists on Ethereum. And, without a doubt, Ethereum was largely conceived as with DeFi as one of the intended use cases of Ethereum. Then I think we've seen this, so that was 2020, DeFi took off on Ethereum. Now you've had 2021 was largely the story of taking the Ethereum DeFi stack and recreating the Ethereum DeFi stack on a whole bunch of other chains like Polygon, Avalanche, etc. That story, I think, has also run its course, where we're just seeing sort of clones of the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. And so the things that excite me the most, certainly Sommelier, but Sommelier, I think, is just part of a larger theme of innovation and specialization, and trying to build things out of these building blocks of Cosmos, of Avalanche, of Solana, that sort of take advantage of the unique properties of different platforms, and actually combine sometimes. And I think you are going to see more applications that combine multiple blockchains to produce an integrated DeFi experience that you can't build out of sort of just one blockchain. In thinking about Sommelier, one is we started working on this project, before the Cosmos DeFi ecosystem had really found its footing. It's really started to now. And for instance, my work with Agoric is very focused on sort of the emergence of DeFi inside of Cosmos. But there's still, the largest chunks of capital are on Ethereum. And so when we decided to focus on Ethereum and Sommelier, we really were all, about what can the Cosmos technology stack really bring to the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem that isn't possible with just sort of innovating on top of Ethereum itself. So this is what I think is DeFi is a property of, I would go so far as to say DeFi is a property of secure computers. Anywhere there are sort of secure distributed computers, DeFi will emerge. But we are still in the very early days of designing these protocols.
Yeah, that's right. And, as much as developers are happy to experiment on the edges of what is possible with decentralized finance, and there'll always be people happy to inject their capital, play around with liquidity, and join in these fun experiments. But the flip side of that, of course, is trying to fit this into some kind of coherent regulatory framework. That's it's a complicated challenge. It's a fast moving challenge, but it's it's always a 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards kind of problem. And I think you were presenting at East Denver a month or so ago, talking about some potential paths to help kind of bridge that gap between DeFi and regulators. How do you think about this?
Yeah, so at Sommelier, we are spending I think probably a lot of DeFi protocols um, are spending their time thinking about regulation. Um, it is, I think, probably a very common, but I think so. My perspective on what needs to be done is basically has like a couple of different pieces. One is I think we need to reframe away from this like characterization of our the way the industry talks about itself in many ways is like, oh, this is like, oh, we have like all of these speculative users. They like the degens, they come in, they ape into your protocol, they trade your coin, like they very excited. It's basically gambling. And I don't, I think that is a piece of the culture. But like, what are these people actually doing is they are essentially sort of beta testing the future of finance. And what they leave behind is knowledge. What we are doing through these, all of these DeFi protocols is there is this massive collective learning about what finance would look like if it was built around sort of public open source infrastructure rather than institutions. And I think that's like the crux of the experiment. The crux of the experiment is how much of finance that currently lies, in granite buildings and armies of lawyers surrounding your database can be reconceived as open source infrastructure that is open to anyone to run, is openly accessible by anyone with a computer, and where the fairness and the health of the market is determined by the software and the incentives among the participants rather than the the procedures inside of an institution. But the toughest piece of this whole era is that we have regulators whose entire mode of operation is built around regulating institutions. And they are confused because they see, essentially startup companies building these pieces of open source software. And they think, oh, this is just another institution for us to regulate, when the thing that is performing the financial function is the protocol, is the open source code. And that doesn't mean regulation doesn't play a role here. I think regulators there's a possible future where there's really constructive engagement between regulators, and we are meaningfully trying to discuss like what is the difference between a set of DeFi primitives that are in beta, what are the flaws of our current set of primitives, how are consumers protected by software, what is the role of things like audits and peer review, and independent analysis and risk management. Like all of these things have a role in a world of open source software, but it's a different role than like institutional finance.
Yeah. And Punk6529 on Twitter, he had a great tweet about this.
He has a great Twitter account.
Yeah, he does. So I'll read you this tweet. He said, the reason that crypto regulatory stuff is so hard is because it is not really a regulatory. Instead, it is more about the architecture of our human rights and responsibilities as society transitions into a digital first civilization. So it's a constitutional level discussion. It's not a mid-tier agency staff discussion. I think that's a really good way of framing it. And it's not just DeFi, it's everything from, what's happening in the EU at the moment with this kind of push to make self-custodial wallets even, a little bit potentially problematic. You kind of have to perhaps even KYC a different wallet address if you want to take your crypto off an exchange, for example, in the EU. That's something they're discussing at the moment. Quite potentially draconian. So it's just, I don't think people really, I'm sure people do appreciate how hard this stuff is, but it's just, and it's also that chicken and egg problem. Traditionally technology is, and I guess technological entrepreneurs are always several steps ahead of, some, not to be diskind, but boomer politicians. It's hard to expect boomer politicians to keep abreast of all this stuff and really understand the full ramifications, right?
I would say that we really are still, even more than we are in the early days of DeFi or the early days of blockchains, we are still really in the early days of computing. A lot of these, a lot of ideas about how human society should be organized have come together over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I think that computing really is sort of a challenge, is destabilizing, is to things like to nation states, to their roles in society, to these questions of what is money, what is trade, what is finance. And so, yes, these are extremely long. I mean, this is why, why have I spent the last, 7-8 years, and why do I anticipate spending 30 or 40 more years in this space? Is because I think that the implications of what we are doing are very large, and that playing a role in shaping how society interacts with the sort of emergence of secure distributed computing technology is a valid and meaningful thing to have done with your life. I'm very motivated by impact, and it seems like I believe that this is a place where being engaged gives you an opportunity to have a large impact.
Yes, indeed. Agree with that. And also, I believe you had it was a fireside chat, something like that, I think, with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce at that DeFi.
Yeah, so we organized this event with TechCrunch.
Yeah, that's it.
Sort of trying to, you have sort of started, you've seen the sort of blockchain discourse, I think, sort of explode into the sort of general tech press and general tech discussion. But one of the things that I think has been missing is we either see things that are like rah pro blockchain, or we see things that are like, blockchains are bad and should be regulated out of existence. I think what we tried to do with this event is really bring together, people who are protocol founders, people who are innovators in this space, and regulators like Commissioner Peirce, people who are involved in lobbying, to really try to kind of shift the conversation from this either everything is good and perfect, or regulation is needed, and it is all a grift and a scam, and we need to. And I am very much in the opinion of we need partners and regulators, and I've had a number of discussions with Commissioner Pierce in various public forums and in, I've had conversations with SEC in private. And I think, the ideal outcome is regulators become more a partner with people who are working in the industry to figure out how constructive regulation could be created.
Yep. That indeed does make sense. All right. Well, just before we go to a very quick break, Zaki, and then we'll come back. We'll have some fun. We'll finish off with the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. But just tell people, where they should go if they are interested by the concept of what you guys are building at Sommelier Finance, and where they should go, how they can get involved.
Sommelier.finance on the internet. You can follow me on Twitter at ZMANIAN. I'm constantly tweeting about all my different projects and activities. These are great places to find us on the internet.
Awesome. Well, we will be back in about 30 seconds. Hold tight, team.
Here's what's being said about Masterworks.
My name is Jacob N. I'm from Long Island, and I've invested over $73,000 with Masterworks. My portfolio performance just wasn't cutting it. I researched all these alternative investments, like crypto and NFTs, but they didn't make sense to me. Then I read about Masterworks in Forbes, and I signed up right away. And now you can too. Thanks, Masterworks.
Get VIP access at masterworks.io and use promo code JACOB. See important disclosures at masterworks.io/DC.
All right, we're back and I'm with Zaki Manian. He's the co-founder of the Sommelier Finance DeFi platform. And, he works on various other projects. As you've heard, very passionate about DeFi. Zaki, I like to finish each Crypto Conversation podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Absolutely.
All right, just want quick, snappy answers, kind of hot take style. I'm sure you know what we mean, Zaki. Question one, I think we know the answer, but where would you say you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum? I feel like Bitcoin has not been having a great time in the last few years. I think the multi-chain thesis has really been taken off. I agree with that. But this is going to be an interesting week for Bitcoin with the massive Bitcoin 2022 conference. Is that something that you'll be looking at?
I decided not to go to Miami. I've been in Europe doing blockchain conferences here. I think, it's interesting that, Terra buying up all this Bitcoin is an interesting sort of outreach from sort of Terra, the Luna community and the Cosmos community into the Bitcoin community. I still think Bitcoin is a pretty special protocol. It's certainly what got me into this space. But one of the things that I think has been interesting is, I think one of the values of Bitcoin is just how mature the market exists around it. But what we've seen with DeFi is that more flexible protocols are actually able to sort of create a lot of that market infrastructure out of code that has taken, a decade for Bitcoin to build.
Yep. All right. Hard to argue with that. What then would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Is that that sovereign communities have the right to we are creating the community computer revolution, which is a natural outgrowth of the personal computing revolution and the internet revolution. And that there will be, we will be building new blockchains for a very long time to come.
Nice, I love it. All right. Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So with, that in mind, whatever you like, but, DeFi, blockchain, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
What is it? I honestly have no idea. I think a lot of people give me credit for seeing this multi-chain world, back in 2015, 2016, and building towards it with Cosmos. And I think it was a lot easier to anticipate how we would get from sort of Bitcoin and Ethereum to this multi-chain world than it is for me to imagine what these things look like with mature multi-chain infrastructure and tens of millions and eventually hundreds of millions of users.
Yeah. Well, the flip side of that, of course, is a famous quote by William Gibson, who said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
One of the things that Cosmos has done very recently that really hasn't is like we have this new thing called Auth-Z, which is sort of delegating capabilities from your wallets to service providers. And I think that there is like a whole generation of non-custodial sort of like people that rather than taking your custody away from you or being your custodian like exchanges do, there's going to be a whole generation of service providers that retain self-custody, but like automate and manage like crypto functions because, I don't know, it's like exhausting just interacting with all the blockchains that like I have a presence on now.
Yeah. All right. Time to zoom out. Time to get a little bit weird for a second. Zaki, what do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
Man, I think it is an ongoing, like, I think the central question of the human race is the race between climate change, the advancement of space travel and artificial general intelligence. And I think that, in the presence of artificial general intelligence, crypto continues to be a very human thing that like allows humans to sort of have one domain in which they have sort of an more equal playing field with artificial intelligences, and so that's why I like to be building here. I'm very pro-human.
Yep. Okay. Well, with that in mind, then the final question, Zaki, is what is your favorite science fiction book, film, TV show, or universe?
They're like that, so the common answer is like I really love, like, Dune is my favorite science fiction book, but actually I'm gonna call it, there's a CBS show called Person of Interest that I think more people in blockchain should probably watch. It was really fun. I think it's on Netflix now, and I think people in the blockchain space would really enjoy like these questions of like, it was like a really well structured written show around like surveillance and AI and hacker culture.
What was it called? Sorry.
Person of Interest.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I'm familiar with Person of Interest. I have I watched that back in the day. It's been around a while, but yeah, it's a good.
Yeah.
It's a fun show. Yeah. Excellent. This has been a good conversation, Zaki. Please take us out by again just shouting out your various platforms, Twitter, wherever you hang out, and of course
Sommelier.finance to learn more and to catch up on the forthcoming launch of the Aave seller, and at ZManian on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Zaki. All the best, and bye for now.